then Nana and her will jump into their conversation. So today we have Adeolu Adewumi-Zer, who is a global strategist and the internationally best-selling author of Afro Optimism Unleashed: Scaling African Excellence to the Global Stage. With over 25 years of leadership across 4 continents, she is the founder of ZER Consulting Africa, where she selectively partners with enterprises generating about $1 million in revenue. Adeolu utilizes her proprietary scale framework to provide the path to global excellence. Previously the MD and CEO of Allianz Nigeria and regional head of M&A for Allianz Africa, she spearheaded a 500 million euro portfolio expansion across Africa. Currently, she is also the CEO of Shared Value Nigeria and an independent non-executive director for Continental Reinsurance. A U.S.-trained actuary with honors from Penn State, Adeolu is a champion for profit with purpose and a featured contributor to the forthcoming 2026 anthology, Unshakable Leadership. So thank you for joining us today, Adeolu. I'm going to turn over the conversation to you and Nana. I appreciate you being here.
Fantastic.
Thanks for having me, gentlemen.
Thanks for getting us started here, Parker. That bio is one that I hope to one day be having people read some of those types of things about me. So certainly you're incredibly accomplished. And I think, as I mentioned, and even as I was sharing about this conversation with some folks, I've been following your commentary on the African insurance space, the African fintech space, since my days at Fleury from a few years ago. And so it's really a true honor and privilege to have you here today. So want to just get started with kind of your career has taken you all over the world. It's taken you through all types of different roles. But part of the reason that I think you're particularly interesting to this group here is your career started as an actuary here in the United States. And so maybe if you could tell us a little bit about how that journey started, how you decided to be an actuary, and what kind of were some of the key skills and competencies you gained from that early part of your career. Would love to kind of start the conversation there.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nana. So I would say that the whole journey began in 95. That's when I entered college at Penn State. So I actually entered as an accounting major. So I knew, I was a math geek. I loved math. And at the time, I never heard of actuarial science. So I knew I didn't want to teach. My father's a professor. I knew I didn't want that life. So for me, I thought the only thing, practical you can do with math is to become an accountant. And it was in that first semester, or maybe it was the first or second semester, where I discovered actuarial science. Like, I don't even remember anymore how I discovered it. Yes, I think I took a stats class and they mentioned it. I was like, oh, what's this? And so, I did some research and I just thought, oh, this is, just really down my alley. And I immediately switched my major and didn't look back since. I did a couple internships as people do. I did my first internship at an insurance company. I think I actually did both my internships at an insurance company. And I knew I didn't want to become an insurance actuary. It just wasn't my personality. I think insurance and consultant actuaries are quite different personalities. I won't say which one is better. Just say we're different. And so as someone who actually enjoys talking to people, I just thought consulting would be more befitting. And so that's actually how I became a pension actuary, because if you're a consultant, you tend to be a pension actuary.
Fantastic. So in that start of your career as a pension actuary, what were kind of the things that kind of allowed you to excel early, the things that kind of positioned you to sort of track towards leadership, and things that you've kind of carried through your journey till today?
Yeah, so I've always been really ambitious. So coming in, so I entered my career into Hewitt Associates, which became Aon Hewitt, and I think it's now just Aon. So Lincolnshire, outside of Chicago. And so I was very ambitious, straight A student, always wanted to be top in whatever I did. So whether it was sports, academics, etc. And so coming into your professional career, you're thinking, okay, what is an A in your professional career is to become a CEO. So I just naturally thought, okay, well, that's where I'm headed. Although I very quickly changed my mind because at the time, yeah, at the time, the role models you had as a woman coming to the professional space, aspiring to that level, wasn't really fitting into what I wanted from a personal standpoint in terms of also wanting to have a family. So, I took a step back and had to rethink, well, maybe the CEO, I don't need to be the front of the company. Maybe I can be the number two, and supporting and then still be able to manage the personal side. Um, but we'll get more into that later and how I changed my mind again. But to answer your question, so I knew that I wanted to be the best, whatever that best meant, uh, because that's just how I was. And I was also very focused. I had always been very focused and was determined to get through my exams as quickly as possible. So, I really, so there were 10 exams at the time. I don't know how many there are now. They kept changing the curriculum. And you take two a year, so you'd be done. Okay, I had one or two coming out of college, so you're basically done in 4 or 5 years, which is, I qualified in 2006, so I did fail one exam. Um, yeah, so that
I failed a lot more than
that still
that.
pains
So
me. That still
I should have
pains
I, I should have taken some tips from you because I failed a lot more than that.
me. So I put a lot of time into I started really early and some people could start like a month before the exam. I had my study schedule. I would start 4 months before the exam. I knew exactly what I was going to do. And so I put the time in so that I could get through the exams as quickly as possible. Because as you're going through the exams, you can't really focus on anything else because the exams just take so much time. Either that or you forget about the exams and you focus on everything else. But as a consultant actuary, if you're not qualified, you don't get very far. So first you have to get qualified as quickly as possible so that it doesn't slow down the other aspects of your career. And then you have to be very focused on what do you want to achieve. And I knew from the beginning that I didn't want to stay in the technical space. So I didn't become an actuary to be an actuary. I became an actuary as a door into going back to Africa. So I have to make that clear as well, that, my vision, my North Star was always to go back, always to get back to Nigeria. Even though I left Nigeria, I was taken from Nigeria when I was very young.
We'll come back to that sort of door to come back to Africa. But in a lot of ways, I can say that that's resonant as well as I've gone through my own career in terms of the idea
Hmm.
that the actuarial profession kind of unlocks a lot of other opportunities. So
Exactly.
I'm really liking to hear that. So as you knew that you didn't want to, let's say, be an actuary, and started to take on those leadership opportunities, what was kind of that first key leadership opportunity you were able to take on? What did that look like? What were kind of the key adjustments that you had to make switching from that early technical, hey, I've just got to get through, the grind of this technical work to, okay, I'm leading a team and, there's different things that are asked of me. What was kind of that transition like?
Yeah, so it was a year after I qualified. So I qualified in 2006, and then 2007, Hewitt decided to start an international benefits team. The US based side already had a European side, but the US based international benefits team. Since I'd been knocking on doors and raising my hand to anyone who would listen to me in the company, that one, I wanted to go to open up a Hewitt office in Nigeria, and two, in the meantime, I raised my hand for any international opportunity that was out there. So it was very clear to anyone and even leadership that I had my sights on going abroad. And so when they started an international team, the person who was picked to lead that team called me immediately and asked me to join him. And so I was one of the founding members, and very quickly. Uh, yeah, well, so we'd worked together. He was, and so I was one of his, trusted members of the team. And so when they decided to, within the first year, when they decided to sort of split the teams into smaller groups because he couldn't just manage them all and have everyone reporting to him. So I was the one that he chose to to sort of parcel off some of the folks too. So that was my first leadership opportunity a year after I qualified.
And was that based out of Chicago, or you'd already moved abroad
Based out
at
of
that point?
Chicago. Yeah, based I
Okay,
was still in
okay.
Chicago. Yeah.
So what were in terms of that experience, what were some of the biggest adjustments that you had to make, now taking over as a leader, particularly even knowing that, this leader is looking for some support and kind of oversight of that group?
Yeah, so I had to get used to the fact that, because I was only 7 years into my career, so I was leading folks who were some of them much older than I am. It wasn't a huge team. It was a team of five. But definitely a couple people had been with Hewitt a number of years. Couple, one or two who were like more like my peers, and then one or two younger. And so being able to manage different generations in a way, age groups, and as a new manager, as someone who's brand new to management, and so really being open and not putting myself there as like the boss, like you need to listen to me because now I have the title. But no, we were a team. So always being open into everyone's insights, going to people, that these experienced people for advice, etc. So that they really felt like um, I respected them, even as maybe even more than they respected me. And so giving that respect so that, in turn, I would get that respect.
Yeah, I really like that idea of kind of respecting the existing expertise on the team. And if I can ask, what was kind of your biggest win in that role that kind of gave you the confidence to continue to pursue leadership beyond that, or to say like, okay, yeah, I can really do this?
Oh, that's a good one. I think it was more like the client side rather than people side.
Okay.
So there was at the time there was a big there was a big survey that Hewitt would run with the pharmaceutical industry, an international survey. So I was tapped to lead that project, and it was a big one, a very high profile, and 30 farmers at the time. Farmers had a lot of money. I think they still have a lot of money. And so interacting with all these senior people in a sector that was very much valued within the company, and being able to deliver such a high profile project successfully pretty relatively early on in my career. So this actually gave me some of the relationships that then pulled me over to the international side, to the real international side. So,
Right, right,
non-US.
right. So I'm glad that you already, you kind of led there, because that's where I was going. So, we're in Lincolnshire now. We're heading abroad, and it sounds like kind of on the heels of this big survey. Um, Tell us a little bit about that journey and I know it sounds like Munich was a part of that at some point. Istanbul was a part of that at some point. Um, what took you to those opportunities? What were those adjustments like? I imagine there was sort of expanding scope in terms of the teams you were leading and the functions you were responsible for. Kind of just tell us about that experience.
Yeah, so the initial move was within Hewitt.
Okay.
So moving from the US-based international team, they decided they wanted to also build an international arm out of Germany. So they had one out of the UK and a couple other continental European countries, but not yet in Germany. So they pulled in a Belgian guy to lead that. He had worked with me on another international project on the US side. So and we had really connected. So then he must have reached out to my boss at the time, because it was my boss then who then said to me, "Oh, we want you in Germany." Didn't know anything about Germany. I hadn't even It wasn't even on my radar screen. And what we'd learned in school wasn't so positive. So so there was a little bit of hesitation, but I looked it up. I saw it's the same time zone as Nigeria. And that sold for me for half the year anyway.
Right, right.
Yeah, so
So
that's
so you think, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was gonna say, so that's how I finally made the leap out of the US, because that's the biggest step to get
Right.
out of the US. And so now I'm not in Africa yet, but at least you're on the same similar time zone. And then in while I was in Germany, then Hewitt went through their merger with Aon. So I actually left, I'd been at the company 10, 11 years. And so I actually thought, okay, no, this is a good time for me to, you start thinking. I think a decade is a good time to start thinking about what your next step is and how do I get to Africa. So I left, I took a sabbatical, and thought I would be moving to the Middle East because that seemed like the easiest move to then get closer. 'Cause a lot of the African companies had their hubs at the time in the Middle East.
Right.
But then a client of mine, Allianz, so I had brought Allianz into the Hewitt family. They reached out and said, "Hey, would you come back and sort of lead the project that you consulted us on from the inside?" And to everyone's shock and amazement, I returned back to Munich. I think
Okay.
people were quite surprised.
Okay. And so I assume by this point, you're kind of out of the technical actuarial stuff into more broader strategic work, or what was the kind of work you were doing at that time?
Yeah, I should
When
have
you went to
mentioned.
Allianz?
So, yeah, in the US, when we moved to the international team, so it was already starting to step away from like really the technical valuation work. I mean, definitely there was very little valuation. It was more like the financial consolidations that you would do on so the US team would do the valuations, and then the international team would do the consolidations for all the various countries. So already starting to step back. And then during my time in Munich, then even moving into more broadly into international benefits. I got my diploma then from the UK. They have the IAB diploma. And then even further into rewards. And so I was really becoming like an HR generalist. And when I moved into Allianz, I moved into the HR team.
Okay.
So I was on the benefits team, but within the global HR department.
Okay. Fantastic. So tell us about that sort of transition and how you kind of grew your career at Allianz then.
Yeah, so the key move that yes, I could have stayed in HR, and I could have risen in HR, but I don't think it would be very unlikely. It's not impossible, very unlikely to become CEO coming out of HR. So
Sure.
the key move then is after a year in Allianz, they were looking for a strategy person on the business side. And the person was specifically looking for someone who had come out of consultancy.
Okay.
And yeah, we hit it off. And but it was key juncture for me because I was actually planning to leave the company at the time. Because I thought like it's too long. Like I want to get back to Nigeria. What am I doing still in Munich? And I was starting to get calls from Nigeria, from various headhunters saying, "Hey, don't you want to come back?" And so I was having all these conversations. So I was very reluctant actually to meet this guy. I was thinking, well, no, I don't want to stay in Munich another couple of years. But I'm so glad. I don't know what my life would have been. I'm sure it would have been great too in its own way. But it was a key decision point to work with someone because this is someone who had been in the insurance industry, a Dutch gentleman, been in the insurance industry for 3 decades or so at the time. He was one of the top guys at Allianz, and I would be supporting him directly to drive strategy globally for Allianz across their various regions in one of their three major divisions. So I think it's that being, knowing that you're where you're headed, but then being willing to be flexible enough to see opportunities that in one way might seem to be slowing you down, but actually, in hindsight, has actually sped you up to reach that pinnacle.
No, that's like personally resonant for me right now, even as I think about my own sort of career moves, and sometimes not being so hasty to get where you think you want to go,
Mhm.
but maybe there's a stop that you need to make to go learn something or go do something or pick
Yeah.
up some experience. And so we're in Munich. I know Istanbul happens at some point. So where does that happen? and then bring us to how you get to Nigeria then.
Yeah, so in this role, I was interacting with our CEOs across the different regions, as I mentioned. So in Asia, in Europe, in the Americas, and so Turkey got brought into the fold in the second year, and so I was interacting with the CEO in Turkey. He learned, by the way, that my husband is Turkish. And so then he started talking to me about, oh, well, what do you want to come to Turkey? Uh, not knowing because we were sitting when we were having this conversation and not knowing I was 8 months pregnant. And so, when
Mm.
I stood up, said, okay, well, let's have this, take your break and then let's have this conversation, which we did. So I think it's also, making sure that you're persistent when those windows or those doors open up and making sure that even if there's a sort of break that you still maintain those relationships. So yeah, got over to Turkey, was there for a couple of years, driving their go-to-market strategy. And it was during that time that Allianz decided to pivot back to Africa, because that was actually the reason I wanted to leave Allianz a few years earlier. It's because I knew that the CEO at the time, the group CEO, was adamant about stepping out of Africa. But then a
Mm.
new group CEO came in, and for whatever reason, I still haven't quite figured out to this day. He's a German. They were both German, but he was very gung-ho on Africa. So, as soon as he came in, the whole African strategy started. I was, of course, the first one to start knocking on and asking what's going on and getting as close to the people I needed to get to. Again, so second baby, 8 months pregnant. I was in Germany meeting with the Dutch guy who would become the regional CEO of Africa, and I was adamant and telling him that I want to join you. I want to join your team. He looked at my belly again, said, "Okay, well, take your break and come back to me when you're back." And when I came back, he actually ghosted me. I won't be bitter about it. We became good friends, but I reached out, and there was this complete like crickets from his side. And then, but I was persistent. That's one thing that, I will get what I want, because I will keep knocking on that door until somehow it's going to open up. So he was silent for a reason, which I found out later. But, so I kept, made sure I stayed on his radar screen. And then finally he picked up the phone one day and called me and said, yeah, um, what would you think about running mergers and acquisitions for me in Africa? And the interesting thing about it is, why did he think I could even do mergers and acquisitions? I never done that. I
Sure,
didn't do corporate finance. I was an actuary,
sure.
uh, and a consultant, and done strategy, but corporate finance is a completely different game altogether. And again, it's relationships, networks, making sure you stay in touch with people. I had done a training a few years earlier with my team. And there happened to be an Italian colleague who joined us for the training in our group because he didn't have his own group, so he joined our group. And so he was originally from McKinsey. The Dutch gentleman also from McKinsey. They knew each other. And so when he was talking and saying, well, I'm looking for someone, preferably an African, who can lead this for me, the Italian guy then thought about me because we had stayed in contact, we had connected, and so I guess it's two bits, right? So the first, that I put myself out there and made sure that the the future regional CEO knew who I was, so that when this other person came and put my name forward and suggested me, he was like, oh, well, I know that person, I know who you're
Yeah.
talking about. So it sort of just made sense for him.
Okay, so you go from this sort of like, hey, I'm a consultant, to now I'm running M&A for a continent. And so maybe the,
Yeah.
the the first question I have is, I know you said the previous group CEO had kind of stepped away from Africa. Did
Mhm.
Allianz still have holdings in Africa at all? Did it still have business in Africa, or was it entirely exited?
No, no. So it still had a bit. So
Okay.
we, well, I still sometimes say we. They were in South Africa and a couple, even in Kenya, they had some small business. So there was a small footprint, but not much.
Okay, so your job was to kind of grow that, through that M&A business.
Exactly,
Okay,
exactly.
so
Allianz is very patient.
so was so was that what I assume that's what took you back to Nigeria then?
That's what took me to Nairobi.
Okay, Kenya
So
first and then
my
Nigeria.
entry,
Okay,
yeah, my entry into the continent was actually Nairobi, Kenya, where I
okay.
lived for 3.5 years. So driving M&A out of there. And one of the first deals I did was actually a small company, insurance company in Nigeria. I was sitting on the board there, and I had actually like come to a resolution or a sort of like a understanding with myself, say, okay, calm down. You've done a number of moves. You've moved your little kids around three times in 2 years or 4 times in 3 years, a lot of moves. You're sitting on the board, you sort of like got to Nigeria. Maybe you don't have to actually live there to have realized your dream. So I had just calmed myself down. And then I think it was just a month later that my boss called me, and this was during COVID, saying, "Hey, we need you in Nigeria." So that same company that was sitting on the board, he needed me to come in as a CEO.
So that was what became. I assume that is that what then became Allianz Nigeria
Allianz
then?
Nigeria,
Okay,
exactly.
so that's the piece that I want to get to because that's where I became familiar with your leadership in the African insurance space, like consultant, leading M&A. These are kind of corporate jobs. Now you're running the ship.
Yeah.
Tell us about that journey. Like what were the first things that kind of smacked you in the face about the job? What was it like moving back to Nigeria? What did that feel like? What was, how did that feel coming back home after so long? What were some of the biggest lessons, work culture, all of that? I mean, what were all of those things like?
Yeah, so you have to remember it was COVID, right? This was 2020.
Yep.
And so the first thing I told them was that I'll come, but I'm not moving my family.
Okay.
So I had to move alone. I left my family in Nairobi, and actually I started the job with the border still shut, so
Oh,
I couldn't
wow.
even move. So I started virtually as a CEO.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
So having to meet the team, we're all on what we weren't using Zoom, but some virtual platform. Always having my video on so that people could know my face and get to know me and all that. So that was that was the first interesting bit. And then the second is that it was a turnaround situation. So the company had been bleeding, which is why they brought me in. And so having to really make some tough decisions right from the beginning in the midst of a global meltdown. As someone who was coming in, yes, I'm Nigerian, but I didn't grow up here, so
Right.
sort of from the outside, uh, and as a first time CEO, which is, also, so having to manage all this. I read a lot. I read a lot of books going into this role. I'm big on reading, and that's my way to learn. I know some people prefer podcasts or YouTube or whatever. For me, it's always been books. So, I read a bunch of books, made like all my plans, talked with my boss constantly about, and also another mentor about how best to go about this. And yeah, just implement it as soon as possible, sort of ripping off the Band-Aid. We had to do a restructuring, a major restructuring. Didn't wait on that. And sort of proving to the head office that we were serious about making a change in Nigeria.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things when you talk about the company was bleeding. Now I'm not asking for like the deep details, the confidentials, but when you sort of observed that, like what were kind of your instincts, what were kind of your reactions? Were they things that you felt like arose from sort of the mechanics of the business? Was it more of a cultural change that you felt like you had to make? I mean, I guess like what was sort of your reaction to, okay, this is a turnaround job, diagnosing what exactly the cause was, and then how to fix it in that environment. And then maybe the flip side of that is what tensions did that cause, again, with you being from the outside, with you being a first time CEO with this new team. Um, and like I said, I don't need the
Yeah,
tabloid
no,
version,
and
but
I won't. I think that would bore everyone anyway. So there were two sides, right? So one was really the technical, like underwriting side, where businesses had been brought into the portfolio that we're not the best. We're not profitable from a technical standpoint, which I
sure.
think all the insurance actuaries will understand what I'm talking about. So, one of I didn't come in alone. I brought in a very experienced chief technical officer, an Indian who had been based in Tanzania at the time, but came with me into Nigeria. So having that person who that because I didn't grow up in insurance, like I'm not an
Right.
insurance expert. I've never claimed to be. So first putting someone who could actually dig into all that that technical side, and had the expertise, the knowledge, the experience to command immediate respect when he was speaking to other underwriters, and brokers, etc. And so that's the first piece we had to tackle. The second piece was really the OpEx side, the expense side. We just had too many people in the company. And I mean that was the reality, right? And so having to lay egos aside and say, well, maybe it's nice to say that you're leading a team of 250, but if you're leading an unprofitable company with a team of 250, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
So how do you best cut that team in half? And but do it in a empathetic way. So really taking people along the journey. So I believe in transparency. Like I prefer to err on the side of transparency. So from the beginning, the first meeting, the town hall that we had, like physically, I gave them the numbers. I said, if we keep going the way we're going, this is where we're going to end up. We're going to close the company at such and such a date.
Hmm.
And if we don't want this to happen, these are the changes we're going to have to make. And so I was upfront with the entire company, not just leadership. So when we had when we talked numbers, I talked numbers with the entire company from all bottom all the way to the top. And so made sure that everyone was clear about where we were, frightened them to death, and then to explain to them what the solution was going to be, and that it would mean that there would be a drastic downsizing. But then also giving them the uh, the understanding of how we were going to take care as much as we financially could, for the people and their friends who would have to be let go. Uh, and I can't say that after that whole exercise went through that I was beloved, by the entire company. But what I can say is that I still had people reach out to me who were uh, negatively impacted by that exercise. So I think that that's at least concrete proof that they could feel that we tried to do what we could.
Right. Right. So I've got a couple of questions before we open it up. One, um, about just kind of the biggest shifts you had to make in moving from working, in Western environments in Chicago, in Germany, and then coming back to Nigeria. And then secondly, shifting from coming from more of a consulting background, business strategy, back to insurance, what that shift was like. And, did it maybe help you that you weren't, sort of an insurance lifer, and could be a little bit more removed from the minutia of the business. So I guess that's kind of a two-part question, but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, the cultural thing is interesting. So I love languages.
mhm,
So I've learned a number of languages, through starting from middle school. So I think, language is important in terms of being able more accepting of different cultures. Secondly, I grew up in State College, which is where Penn State is located. And so a college town where you're always interacting. Well, if you're in connection with the university, which I was because of my dad, you're always interacting with international students. I really felt that even though I grew up in the US, even though I grew up in like farm cornfield US, that I still had sort of like this international bubble and
Sure, sure,
exposure.
sure,
Which, if anyone has been to State College, like Happy Valley, you know that is like surrounded by, well, it's very white. Let's call it
sure, sure, sure.
but thankfully, growing up at a college campus, so that I had all this interaction with international students, not just African students, but students from all over. A lot of Asians, I remember, because my dad's in engineering, and so having all this interaction. In college itself, also I was like involved with everyone. I saw Tony pop up, so Tony will remember. I was interacting with like the Asian the fraternities, the Black fraternities and sororities, like the Indians. We are the world is sometimes what people would call me. So I always had this like affinity and ability to interact with people from wherever they are. Like I just accept you how you are and expect that you accept me how I am. So going to from the US to Germany, where Germany, okay, is a bit different. But I think I had the advantage that one, I was a very obvious foreigner, which can actually be an advantage in a country like Germany, because then the expectations are just not there. Like they don't
Right,
expect you to act German,
right, right.
and wonder why you're not, doing like everything the way a German would do because they just see that you're not German. And also living in a place like Munich, which actually happens to be quite cosmopolitan for a German city. And if you interact with Germans at all, they tend to be very private. I tend to ask a lot of questions. And so so the obvious foreigner allowed me to ask a lot of questions and actually
Sure,
have people answer them and
sure.
actually have me allowed me to get to know people so that we were actually able to connect in a way that they wouldn't normally connect with a colleague. Going to Turkey, Turkey again, completely different than Germany. So, all these countries, US very different than Germany, Germany very different than Turkey. Of course, in Turkey, I had a Turkish husband, so everyone loved that. Half Turkish kids, yeah, and the Turks just, they were just fascinated by that. So that already, just broke everyone's heart. And they're also very open to foreigners is my experience. And then moving to Kenya which was another interesting move because uh, the Kenyans would never believe I was Nigerian. I don't know what kind of concept they have of Nigerians, but when they would find out I was Nigerian, they just like, no, 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 but you look like you're from this tribe. You look like you're from this. I was like, no, I'm not Kenyan. I'm
Sure,
Nigerian. Like, yo, but you're not big enough. Yeah, well, all Nigerians are not the same.
sure.
But yeah, and then coming to home to Nigeria could have actually been the hardest move because I think when you've grown up a long time outside the country and then you come into the country and then there's all these expectations and you're not like that, right?
Hmm.
You're a third culture kid. You're not American. You're not Nigerian. You're just some kind of strange hybrid. And so. I think that the accent. So in Germany it was the look.
Right,
In Nigeria it's the accent. So as soon as people hear my accent, they're just like, oh, okay.
right. This person's not from here.
Yeah. You're not a real Nigerian,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever that's supposed to mean. So I get away with a lot, and I know I get away with a lot. And I'm also very laid back with, I don't do ma and sas, and I don't want people to call me madam, and I just
Right,
want to
right, right.
let's cut the BS and go to first names and all that. And maybe behind my back, people are mumbling and grumbling, but at least to my face, they seem to accept that all.
Do you
That
feel
was the
like
first
that?
part of the question. There was a second part.
So so well, the second part was being a leader in an insurance organization, not coming from an
Oh,
insurance
right.
background.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really, just quickly, kind of what that experience was like, and did that maybe help you because you weren't caught in the minutia of sort of insurance operations?
I think it did, particularly in Nigeria, because the insurance industry I find very close-minded. I'll say that. Very
Okay.
close-knit and close-minded. And so I was coming in with all my crazy ideas, and there's even newspaper articles. I'm sure you can find them where they were like, "Oh, does Allianz really want to be in Nigeria? They're trying to get out of Nigeria because we were making all these changes. We weren't doing things the way everybody else was doing it. We weren't running after these big, sexy companies that actually were really loss-making." And so
Mhm.
everyone was convinced, or at least the media was convinced that it was just Allianz's way of trying to get out, slide out of Nigeria. Um, but yeah, that's I pretty much took a take me as I am approach to the Nigeria industry, insurance industry. So I benefit from the fact that I wasn't really coming from deep insurance, and also the fact that I hadn't grown up in that home environment.
Right. And then final question before we open it up. I know I've taken more time than I typically would, but like this is the conversation that keeps giving. So moving from that corporate leadership to what you now do as a consultant, why did you make that change?
Yeah, so I knew, okay, there were three things. One, I knew that I didn't want to go back to Munich because
Okay.
I had made it home. Like, why would I want to leave,
Sure.
leave that dream behind? So that would have been the next move, right? To go back to, if I wanted to stay at Allianz, to go back to Munich. They want to do that. So I knew I was leaving the insurance industry. And I even went to the regulator and I told him point blank that I'm leaving. When I leave Allianz, I'm leaving the insurance industry. So I knew I wasn't going to stay in the insurance industry. I took about a year off again as a sabbatical to just figure out, okay, but what does that mean? Like I've achieved a dream. What is the next dream? And talk to a bunch of people. I talked to anyone actually who would talk to me. And when they said I should talk to someone else, I talked to them too. And was so close to going into private equity, having done M&A, thinking private equity would be a natural move. But then I got called back to my consulting roots and just thought that what I actually really love to do is to help people. And then my time in on the continent had helped me to open my eyes to how much I could help, not from a obnoxious, I know better than you kind of way, but I've had a lot more exposure than a lot of people here, or most of the people
Yeah.
here. And I felt like I actually had a duty to pass that knowledge and pass that and give that access because with my network, give that access to folks who maybe weren't able to build it themselves.
No,
And so
that's
that's how I
fantastic.
landed back in consulting.
That's fantastic. Well, I'll kind of shut up now, and I want to open it up for audience questions. But this has been a fantastic discussion of your journey and kind of the lessons you've learned and experiences you've had. So, any questions from folks on the call here? And feel free to just raise your hand, and we'll try to get to them as efficiently as we can, or throw them in the chat as well. Either one.
And as we're waiting for questions, so I wanted to just thank all the folks. If you've joined, I had reached out to a number of people who had reacted to the IABA post just to ask you, what you'd like to hear today. I hope I've been able to drop some of those tidbits in, but if I haven't and you're on, feel free to ask the question again.
Cool.
Fantastic. I see Hannah. Go ahead. Feel free to come off mute and ask.
Thanks, Nana. Hi, Adiola. Thank you so much for your time. This was I really enjoyed listening to y'all's conversation. My question is something you mentioned early on. You said you made it very clear about your interest to move abroad, and it sounded like you did that early on in your career. And I feel like as someone early in my career, I hear that you have to find a balance between sort of sharing these like long-term goals and keeping them kind of close to your chest and quieter and then working towards them. I'm curious about like your perspective on who you decided to share your interest to move abroad with. Was that something you mentioned to anyone, or were you selective in who you decided to kind of share this goal of yours with? And how did you decide who was like someone who was worthy of knowing this goal of yours? Thanks.
All right, thanks for the question, Hannah. So I told anyone and everyone. I was not shy. So even in my very final interview with the then general manager of Hewitt Associates, so the number two in that organization, I told her I wanted to open up a Hewitt office in Nigeria. So that's my style. I don't hide what I'm trying to do. So it worked for me. And I was working in a very positive, uh, developing environment, and I didn't feel like I needed to hide something from my managers. They didn't think I was trying to run away because I said I wanted to open a Hewitt office, right? So I wanted to stay part of the family, but I was just making it very clear where I was headed.
Yeah, fantastic. Other questions? I'm not sure, Parker or Jeff, if you guys are seeing hands as well.
I haven't seen any yet.
Okay. Um, I'll I'll go ahead and throw one while I keep looking for hands. But
Mhm.
in what's been kind of the biggest observation you've had as a consultant now, um, working, focused on working with African founders and CEOs?
That people don't know what they don't know,
Okay.
which is not, I mean, which is all of us, right? We don't know what we don't know. So. And what I mean by that is that many founders tend to be quite early in their professional careers. Many of them
Mm,
have never worked in a corporate environment, which I think is a huge detriment actually. So if anyone would say, okay, what's the first thing, or what's the most critical thing I should do before I start my own company, is to actually get a handful of years working in someone else's company, in a real company, so that you actually understand, processes and, how to manage people and how to run a P&L and, just basic things that you learn, even just how to write an email and how to interact with customers and clients, etc. These are basic things you learn in the first 5 years of any corporate career. Um, as opposed to when you just start and say, okay, I'm 21, I'm just going to start my business, and you haven't done any of that, then you're completely clueless. And I see that too many times.
no, that's as a startup leader a couple of times. I would say that's also my observation as well. Is like, what you learn in corporate teaches you how work should be done, and
Yeah.
gives you a framework for how to implement and execute processes. So that resonates with me a ton. I see a couple of
Which is
chats
why I
questions.
love, which is why I love
Okay,
working with mature, what I call mature founders, right?
right,
So people who are like having worked, a decade or so in the corporate
right,
world. I mean, it's just so much easier to work with them.
right. I see a couple questions in the chat. One from
Yep.
Anu. Um, So when navigating roles that you didn't have a strong background in, how did you build trust with those that were looking to you for expertise and leadership?
Oh yeah, that's good. That's good. Thank you for that question. So for me, it's setting ego aside and just fully admitting that you don't know, and being willing to say that, and being willing to ask questions and to listen and to get advice from other people who have a lot more expertise in it. And it doesn't even have to be your team. You can ask questions out to your network, meet people for coffee or for lunch or whatever, and just pick their brains. That's in addition, of course, to the theoretical learning that you're getting, well, that I would be getting from reading books, but also being able to just being willing to set your ego and just open yourself up to learning from others.
Gotcha. And then I see one more from Kay as well. How much is data a concern when working with companies in Africa, or how much is data concerned just on the continent in general in industry from what you've observed?
Let's try to understand when we say like data privacy or
Yeah, maybe Kay,
getting data or
if you could provide that clarity, but maybe go down the directions that you just mentioned. So both getting data and data privacy.
yeah, so getting data in this part of the world is definitely more difficult. It changes from country to country. So for example, data quality. Okay. For example, in Kenya, it's much easier to get higher quality data than it is in Nigeria. If I use the insurance industry as an example, in Kenya, the insurance regulator will publish the results of all the insurance companies quarterly. So it's out there. It's online. You can get it. In Nigeria, I mean, they're starting at least annually to get there, but yeah,
I'm only asking. I only laugh because I think about some times when I would pipe in some data requests to some of our partners in Nigeria and just be like, "All right, I guess we're not working with that then." So that's yeah. There's some interesting memories there.
yeah.
I saw Koyan's hand go up, so Koyan, maybe if you can pop off and ask your question.
Thanks, Donna. Thanks, Adeolu. I have two quick questions. One, first of all, uh, excited to hear what you're doing in Africa. And given that Nigeria, I think the number of actuaries on Google, credentialed actuaries in Nigeria, is somewhere around 22 to like 30 something. Uh, how can Nigeria replicate like South Africa's success, right? I think South Africa has a lot more credentialed actuaries. And number two, as a leader, thinking 5 years from now, where does AI disrupt the actuarial profession?
I tell people you can't get through one meeting without AI coming up. So thanks. You squeeze that one in. Thanks for the question. So yeah, the number of actuaries in Nigeria, that I wonder if any of our NAS folks, our colleagues are on. I sent the brochure to them much too late, so I'm not sure if they would have been able to manage to join us today. But if you're on, please feel free to raise your hand and answer the question. But so there are fewer actuaries, qualified actuaries in Nigeria, even in Kenya. And to give you some perspective, Kenya has like 40, 50 million people, and Nigeria has 250. So yeah, I'm not sure I'm the one who can answer that question as to how can we get more actuaries in Nigeria. I would say that more respect for the industry maybe would be the first one. In the US, I think that you can't find an insurance company that doesn't have actuaries. In Nigeria, it's tough to find an insurance company that has an actuary. I mean, I think maybe Leadway has actuaries, ICO, but Allianz didn't have any. Uh, so yeah, that's the first step. Like if the industry isn't asking, demanding for actuaries, then why would people bother to stress themselves about taking exams? They can succeed in insurance without it, and there's no pension or DB plans. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
think to that point, what you mentioned in terms of the culture, like here we have a very sort of risk-led culture in our insurance industry. And in my experience, the insurance cultures, at least in Ghana and Nigeria, were very sales-led, um,
yes,
as opposed to being risk-led. And so,
yeah.
I mean, who knows if you could find an actuary? And so you need a quote run, it might take you 3 weeks, and who knows who's running it. So I apologize for my
Exactly.
violent laughter at that, but that caused me a lot of pain for a couple of years.
It's the truth. It's the truth. And
I've
then with
got
the second question, oh, sorry, I had to get the second question.
no, go ahead.
AI, something about how AI will change. I mean, AI is going to change everything. It's already changed everything. There's no easy. I mean, in one sense, there's an easy answer to that. In a different sense, we don't know. One of we have a three-pillar strategy focus for this year, and one of those pillars is to become AI first. I don't even know what I mean by that when I say AI first, but I know that we're small enough, we're nimble enough that if we can implement AI into our operations and how we do things and become efficient, we can punch way above our weight, and go toe to toe with some of the bigger consultancies. Why not?
Fantastic.
Thank
I
you.
want to get I want to get to two questions in the chat. I know we're going to probably run like 2 minutes over, but one is your experience in kind of that startup and entrepreneurial environment, as well as management in Nigeria and the African continent. Uh, and the question says, as an actuary, I don't know if I've contextualized that question appropriately. Um, but yeah, maybe let's start with that. Your experience kind of in the entrepreneurial environment in Nigeria and on the continent.
Yeah, so I was never an entrepreneur. I mean, I had people who had over the years suggested to me that I should start my own business. That was never my thing. I was very much a corporate stooge, and that's where security is. I'm an actuary anyway, right? Right. So risk averse. But I'd already gone through, how I came to realization that I was going to go back into consultancy, and open up my own business. It was like an overnight decision. One weekend, I just had a sort of come to Jesus moment. Am I allowed to say that? Anyway, and just decided I was going to do this. And what's the worst that could happen? I can always go back to corporate life if it didn't work out, right? So, with my background and with my skill set. So my experience with entrepreneurship has been started in 2023 when I launched my company and started working with entrepreneurs all over the continent, and helping them to deal with their problems and really scale their for the global stage, which really our focus is not to play small. You
Right.
know, we want Africa to play big and to take its proper place on the stage. So that's what we're working with companies across the continent to do that. I know we don't have much time, so I'll just pause that one there.
No, I love that. And the final question we'll take is from your friend Anthony Weatherspoon here, kind of reversing one of the leadership questions that we typically hear. So a lot of times people will ask, what would you tell your younger self? But he asks, what would you take from your younger self to remind yourself of your capabilities, and that sort of carries you through as a leader today?
Wow. Ending with such a tough question. What would I take from my younger self? Huh. I've just loved every age that I've gone through. I feel like I'm just getting bigger and better, and just more settled into my skin, and just like things that I had. So when I was younger, I was definitely, I'm the oldest of five kids, so always very um responsible, and I still am. I mean, it's not that it changed, but always very responsible, always wanting to do the right thing, always a do-gooder, people pleaser in a way. And so that's one of the things I've really been able to shift, particularly with that time when I moved into the strategy area in Munich with a key manager at the time. So learning from him that I didn't need to please everyone. So I know I'm not answering your question but I think I would just say that every experience, even though the ones that I thought were negative at the time, have really made me into the person that I am today.
Absolutely love that. And with that, I'll kind of wrap us up here. But Adeolu is so grateful for the conversation today.
I just want to
And
leave one point, may
oh,
I?
please do.
Yeah, so I'm hearing that there might be a lot of interest in how I can get back home for the people who are coming from their motherland, or even from people who are not directly coming. We're part of the African diaspora. The African diaspora is, I think, 350 million at last counts, third largest population, so to say, in the world. And we want you to come back. And coming back doesn't mean that you physically have to come back. Lend your talent, lend your treasure, be a part of what we're trying to build here. And if you want to just know a bit more about my journey, you had mentioned Afro optimism, Alicia. I don't know if you can see that yeah, the camera is fading. But anyway, my book is available on Amazon at bookstores across the US online. So, part of me writing this book was really to give a window to folks who are somewhere else in the diaspora that it is possible to come home and show you a way to get there.
Fantastic, fantastic. So grateful for that commentary and for this, like I said, for this discussion. It's been an absolute privilege to discuss your journey with you and kind of some of the key lessons and learnings from that journey. So really appreciate your time this evening.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Fantastic. And Parker, any final words to close us out today?
Yeah, again, thank you for everybody for being here. Our next coffee conversations will be in February, same time, last Thursday in February at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Look for your emails for a survey just to figure out how we can continue to improve these. But again, thank you, Adeolu, for your time, and thank you all for being here.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.